I believe, in my personal opinion, that crypto in general, Bitcoin in particular, should be a small part of an overall portfolio strategy. I
Hello, Empower Nation. Welcome to Empower Her Money podcast. I'm your host, Angela Duncan, speaker, best-selling author, serial entrepreneur, and I love talking about money. Today's episode, I am so excited for you. I get to interview Dr. Tonya Evans. She's also a professor. She has been studying digital money and crypto for a long time, has taught courses about it. We're going to talk about the myths, and she's going to expose those myths on the show today. We're going to talk about what is crypto, what is digital money, how it is affecting the global economy. We'll talk about the halving and a little bit of controversy about who started crypto or the Bitcoin. So check out the episode. And today's episode is also sponsored by morewithangela.com, where we are bringing you, our team brings to you the wealthy strategies to help you passively earn income, double digits we're talking about, without having to put in the time and the energy in finding real estate. So please go to morewithangela.com today, book a call with me, and let me help you start on your passive income journey where we teach you to keep more, make more, live more. Morewithangela.com. Welcome, Dr. Tanya Evans, to Empower Her Money podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for having me. I've been catching up on your show, and so I'm really looking forward to the conversation. And I just always love connecting with amazing women in particular, to talk about these topics. So I think we're going to help a lot of people.
Yes, we are. We're going to talk about digital money, crypto today, which I've said before on my show is I'm not something I currently invest in, mainly because I just don't understand it. And I
Yeah.
never recommend to invest in something you don't understand. But you've been doing this for quite some time. So why don't we start with your backstory so that our audience can understand why you truly are an expert in this field?
Well, I am a law professor at Penn State Dickinson Law School. I have a co-hire appointment at the Penn State Institute for Computational and Data Sciences. I am an intellectual property lawyer by training, and most of my writing and speaking and teaching has been at the intersection of intellectual property, mostly copyright, but also some trademark. My mom's a patent attorney, but I was the sensitive, curious, athletic child. My parents are the scientist type. My dad is a surgeon. My mother is a retired patent attorney. So I didn't get that gene, but I do have the lifelong learner gene to be sure. And I spent the first 10 years of my practice in big law. And first I clerked in the Third Circuit, practiced in big law, had my own practice with my mom for a bit until she semi-retired to go into nonprofit work. And then I went into academia. I've been here for about 15 years. I first entered the crypto or digital asset space in 2017, probably not only like you, but a lot of your listeners that I heard about magic internet money, did not want any part of it. It's like it sounded like drug money, and I love my dollars. I will, even to this day, I'm a crypto proponent, and we'll talk about that. But I never say don't do any of the traditional things. The the dollar is the global reserve currency. We live in America, so that speaks for itself. But I also know that traditional approaches weren't enough. And even if personally I was not sold on crypto and I know I needed to figure out the difference between the underlying technology. And I had a
Mm.
huge responsibility to train the next wave of lawyers to be conversant in the space. One of the biggest, all of our ethical obligations are important, but one that I think lawyers miss a lot, and the thing that I've leaned into, is technological competence as being part of an intrinsic part of the competence to practice law. And that means more than turning on your computer, which some of my
Mhm.
dear colleagues struggle with as well. A story for another day. So I needed to lean in, particularly at the intersection of intellectual property and this new technology, to figure out at a deep dive level what it meant for IP, what it meant for digital ownership, and what the underlying technology could do and how a lawyer needs to be well versed to meet the moment. And so that's what drew me in initially.
Oh yeah. So let's dive right in. For our audience that maybe is living under a rock and doesn't quite understand, what exactly is crypto?
Cryptocurrency, well, I'll take even one step back before saying the basic definition. Well, let me actually, I'm going to start with the basic definition and then we can unpack. If you recall, peer-to-peer technology that used to be used just for quote unquote file sharing. And as an intellectual property lawyer, a lot of that was copyright infringement, but that's a story for another day. We were using a technology that allowed you and I to exchange digital files. At that time, it happened to be an entertainment or media file, right? MP3s, MP4s, and the like. Now we use that technology in addition to a means of securing the information. The information is now about value, not just about entertainment. So with the same technology that we could use with peer-to-peer, file sharing, with certainly the internet, and also which is just it's encrypting data because money is no good if I can have a perfect digital copy of it, but also close friends we did with MP3s. So the magic of the first type of cryptographically secured digital currency, that being Bitcoin in January of 2009, is a major step forward, not just for those who hold Bitcoin, but it has transformed and really forced governments around the world to reassess how we store money, how it's created, the concerns about printing money and causing inflation, and comparing and contrasting that with a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin that actually has a hard cap. There will only and ever be 21 million Bitcoin in circulation. And so that's why people also talk about it maybe as digital gold or a hedge against inflation, because we can't actually say the same thing about the dollar, for example. So I'll pause there to see if there's a follow-up.
Yeah, and I like that explanation too. Like there's a finite amount, right? Once we hit that amount, that's it. Whereas the US dollar and most, like the euro, they just keep printing it, keep printing it. So really having a value on something that is limitless is really, can be confusing to some people. But you also wrote about it in the book. And I've been reading through your book, The Digital Money, which you also have demystified behind you. And
Yes.
what I really found interesting in this, and a lot of times what I hear objections for people is the myths that come behind crypto, So I would love for you to talk about some of the key ones that you have listed in the book, and maybe we'll go through them one by one so that people can understand what the myth is and then your kind of truth and explanation behind it.
I love that. I really wanted to focus on, kind of the top 10 myths that are persistent and things that I certainly believed as well. Some of the myths, there's just no truth at all, but it's just a persistent myth, and we'll talk about those. And then more often than not, and I think that you've experienced that in the book, there's a kernel of truth or some truth, but it needs to be right-sized in terms of the information. So some of the things that I talk about most frequently, that crypto is only for criminals, crypto is a fad or a scam, um, bad for the environment, which is something I was very worried about and continue to be concerned about, but always right-sizing the conversation. So let's talk about crypto is for criminals. I think that's like the number one. You could look at any headline. Some of it is lazy reporting. Some of it harkens back to the early days where we really kind of have the fringe of the fringe focused on cryptocurrencies, but not to use it for nefarious purposes per se. There's certainly people who use cryptocurrency for nefarious purposes. It's actually a pretty bad way to conduct criminal activity because of the nature of the way that information is stored and presented. With blockchain, people talk about blockchain technology, forget about the big fancy words. What that essentially is a digital record of real-time time-stamped data about transactions and balances at any particular time, forward facing. We could go on and see that in real time all day, every day. That is very different from the financial system, which is rather opaque. Oftentimes we need laws in order to force transparency because by its nature, the traditional or TradFi system is opaque. Not so in the crypto world. So it's actually really a terrible way for criminal activity to go forward over the long term. The Department of Justice has done a very good job of literally tracking the money because you see from one wallet to the next, which is a part of another bit of information or myth that it's crypto is completely opaque, it's completely anonymous. It's actually pseudonymous. You're identified by your wallet address in the same way my home is identified by its public address,
Mm.
right? But the only way to actually access my home is this thing private key cryptography. You can know a public address, you can see the public address, and therefore you can see the transactions from address to address, which is the way, as a matter of blockchain forensics, DOJ and other law enforcement offices have done a really good job of tracking down crypto. So, and the final point here is that there are companies like Chainalysis. Chainalysis is not the only one, but certainly one of the more prominent that have done extensive research and data reporting about how much of crypto is actually used in criminal activity. And it's literally, hold your hats, people, it's literally less than 1%. That does not mean it's insignificant. We know Sam Bankman-Fried, horrible person, enjoy your time in jail. But that tends to be the exception, not the rule. So I think that's a major thing that people don't understand. And then also fad or scam. There is nothing inherent in crypto that makes it a scam. In the same way that the first use case for, popularized internet for electronic mail, I still get people saying, I will gladly send you $10,000. Just please give me your bank account number. We didn't throw out electronic mail because some idiots were using it for terrible purposes. And in the same way that we don't do that with our texts, I'm getting more and more texts now
Mhm.
with scams. So scammers will gravitate to value. And the tool of crypto or any other financial technology is just one of the tools that they will try to use to scam people. And so I often focus on the activities of scammers, not the technology itself, which is agnostic. It's a
Mhm.
combination of consensus protocols, the internet, peer-to-peer protocols, cryptography, which has been around for millennia, in a novel way in order to give some independence to people in addition to government issued currency.
Interesting. So for the business owners, I'm starting to see a little bit more acceptance with business owners. Can you talk about, as a business owner, if you did want to incorporate to be able to accept crypto, what does that look like? And why do you think more business owners are either starting this direction or afraid to go to this direction?
Yeah, it is too. It's FOMO, but also what I call fogey, fear of getting in, right? We have
Mhm.
fear of missing out and fear of getting in. And all of it, the underlying part is fear. A lot of it is once you have distinguished yourself and have a foundation as a business owner, you want to keep your customers within your ecosystem. This is why for years at this point, MasterCard and Visa have started to find ways on the back end to incorporate crypto in general, probably Bitcoin in particular. It's the one that there's no question about in terms of whether or not it is a commodity. I happen to believe Bitcoin is not the only one. I think Gary Gensler at the SEC would disagree with me, but we'll see. We'll see what the courts say. But business owners really want to lean in and move forward with what is going to be a way for them to keep their customers and their clients and to deliver the services faster, more efficiently, and in a less expensive fashion. And whatever that technology is, I think the most savvy and forward-thinking business owners are going to lean into that technology. And we
Mm.
should also look at the way the banks are moving. It makes me think, for example, of the JP Morgans of the world. We have Jamie Dimon saying that, Bitcoin is absolute basura, it's trash, don't even think about it. But JP Morgan was one of the first in line to be an authorized participant in order to custody Bitcoin on behalf of companies like BlackRock and
Mhm.
uh, ARK Invest and Fidelity, others who are getting into, not only getting in, have already issued their first Bitcoin, spot Bitcoin exchange traded fund, for example. So I don't want us to listen to what they say. We have to look at the way big business legacy institutions are moving as well, because rest assured, they don't want to lose their market share and their dominance. And they see that they have a customer service issue. So the small and medium-sized businesses that are more likely to be able to pivot. They can just be more proactive. There are fewer decision makers. I actually think that medium and small sized businesses can really just be more nimble and to meet the needs of customers and clients when you think of investing, consumption, and other ways to participate in a Web3 ecosystem that the biggies just aren't going to be able to do as quickly.
Okay. Can you talk about a process a little bit if a business owner is thinking, all right, I want to be able to accept crypto as an exchange of payment for my services. What do they need to think about? Like some tips that they should be considering when starting down that route?
One thing that is critically important is to understand there are thousands upon thousands of different coins and tokens. So spending some time, like you want to move, but you should move slowly, thoughtfully, because the consequences of doing something wrong jeopardizes your whole entire business. So I'd rather see you learn, figure out the intersection between your particular business and the intersection with blockchain and cryptocurrency. That's what I did as an intellectual property lawyer, because you'll never know. I'm to be an expert at this time, and I do not know all the things about all the things because the news and the headlines change all the time. Regulatory concerns change all the time. Those regulatory issues are different in different countries as well. So if you have a footprint beyond the United States or beyond the EU, then you really want to understand the implications of where you are doing business. And back to this original point about the different types of coins and tokens, you have to understand about the reason that a cryptocurrency exists, also whether or not it is deemed to be a commodity or a security. What you don't want to do is to be involved in an unregistered security and then be on the hook for the consequences of that as well. And that's why the regulatory analysis is a critical concern, so that you are not mistaking the point and the regulatory category of Bitcoin versus Ethereum versus Doge, the difference between meme coins, the difference between a coin and a token. A coin, and sometimes people use these terms interchangeably, but a coin is a native asset to a blockchain in the same way that a Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency is the native coin is it's the native transaction that occurs on the Bitcoin blockchain, meaning that the Bitcoin blockchain, the reason for being is actually to record the transactional data of Bitcoin. You compare that with the Ethereum ecosystem, the native coin for Ethereum, or the Ethereum virtual machine, the Ethereum network is Ethereum, ETH, but it was created for a very different purpose, to basically be a virtual computer, a virtual operating system, I think is a better way to say it, that really supports the build of applications on top of that infrastructure, which means that you can have a token like Doge or MKR or DAI, and have their transactions written to the Ethereum network, to the Ethereum blockchain, but not be its native coin, which is ETH. So there's a lot to learn about the nuances. You don't have to know everything, but one final thing is you should definitely work with someone who's conversant in the space. A lot of my time spent now, I'm actually on leave from Penn State Dickinson Law School, although I did teach my blockchain and crypto course this semester. They're like, go off, take your book, but please do teach this one thing, and then we'll be good. You have to work with someone who speaks this language, who's conversant in the space and can give you really good advice. That being said, if there are a lot of third-party companies that will help you onboard, it's far easier today than when I first got into the space in 2017. So there are a lot of third-party web clients that can help you easily accept, and they've done kind of that heavy lifting behind the scenes to make sure that you can get up and running quickly.
Okay. I would love to know your opinion on the global effect of crypto because, there are some countries where, unlike us in the US, I can drive 5 minutes and go to a bank, and it's very easy for me to, exchange US currency. In other countries, perhaps, that might not be the case, but how is the rest of the globe kind of adapting to a crypto environment?
It's interesting that the United States is actually starting to fall behind. I
Hmm.
just spent some time I'm on the board of Digital Currency Group, which is one of the largest, if not the largest VC firm that has a portfolio of over 200 companies in the crypto space and in fintech. And the founders went down, and as a board member, I went down to DC as well to have some high level conversations with senators and with representatives about what the state of the regulatory environment is in the United States.
Hmm.
We just have the alphabet soup as a matter of regulation, SEC, CFTC. I mean, we could go down the list. And in addition to that, we have the alphabet soup on the legislative side about which committees would share authority or have oversight, whether or not legislators will actually create new frameworks that would be applied to the regulatory state as well. And we're in an election cycle right now. There's not going to be anything passed at this point. Maybe not even, there's some things that are percolating, but I think it's a lot of we're about to, but not a lot of we are going to do,
Mhm.
because it's a dangerous thing to do in an election cycle. So we wait here in the United States while the rest of the world moves forward. It makes me think of various countries in the Caribbean. It makes me think of the Bahamas and their sand dollar. They have a central bank digital currency, for example. It makes me think of Bermuda. I was on an advisory board for some time for Bermuda. We were talking about things that the United States is still grappling with, but their government is smaller. In the same way we talked about small and medium-sized businesses, I think small and medium-sized governments can be a little more nimble when you have like one regulator, one guy or gal, and you can say, are we going to go in this direction or not? It makes me think of Singapore. The UAE is extremely forward thinking, and there are Bitcoin mining rigs, huge Bitcoin mining rigs in Dubai, if I'm not mistaken, excuse me, Abu Dhabi as well. Although Dubai is very forward thinking as well. The in Zug, Switzerland has always been forward thinking as well. So many countries are moving forward. And is it El Salvador? I think it's El Salvador. I don't have my notes in front of me and I like to be specific, but one country in particular that actually has declared Bitcoin to be legal currency, legal
Hmm.
tender. Meanwhile, we're still trying to figure out if ETH is a commodity or a security. And so my concern is that the United States will fall behind and will force companies overseas when it's not that they don't want to avoid regulation, but it needs to be clear because the consequences, again, of getting this wrong, exposes all sorts of legal issues and concerns that one way or another, tough regulations or not, at least they're clear in other countries. And so that's my real concern with making sure that we not only keep up, that we decide to lead.
Yeah, good information too, because I don't study crypto and do talk a lot about business outside of the US. So I always like hearing the different trends and where, an expert like yourself could see the future going with the global economy as well, because that obviously affects us here in the US.
Absolutely. And also in African countries as well, makes me think of how forward-thinking Nigeria, Ghana, in particular, their governments are working on central bank digital currencies. A good friend of mine, Carmel Cadet, has a company, MTech, and they work on bridging the divide between TradFi and DeFi, or decentralized finance. Not just here in the United States, but the greater impact is abroad, where you have, you were making a point earlier that, here in the States, we can, in many places, not all, because there are some banking deserts here in the United States as well, which forces people to rely like on check cashing places. It's really expensive to be poor. right? To have meager means. And we see this also in other countries as well, where there's not a bank or there's kind of like a rogue government in some place that doesn't make it safe, or the local currency, by the time you are paid, it's a shell of its former self. So you have to spend
Mm.
as quickly as possible, or transfer it from the local currency into dollars because it's the global reserve. Now people have another alternative in cryptocurrencies, in particular Bitcoin. Excuse me, so that while we most developed and mature economies don't see the need for an alternative currency. Much of the world actually sees the need precisely because of inflationary concerns, because of government concerns. For women who aren't always in a position, maybe through religion or other issues under a particular government that need to rely on a man in order to be successful. This provides a counter narrative and another opportunity for payment and long-term prospects.
Okay, switch gears a little bit. Crypto as far as investing. I would love to hear your thoughts, about using crypto as an investment vehicle and kind of the pros and cons and or the issues that you see with utilizing that as an investment vehicle.
I've been talking about this a lot more. When I first started, particularly as a lawyer and as an educator, I used to steer clear of conversations about investing, and I was sticking like just the facts, ma'am, and just education.
This
But
is
I
not
realized,
financial advice by any
right,
means.
not legal, not financial advice. I'm licensed to practice law in 4 states, and I'd like to keep my license. So
Yes.
we're just talking. But I've leaned in a bit, not only to talk about daily price. I don't talk about it daily, but weekly. I have a newsletter, free newsletter, and I send out information in that way because the speculation around investing is a major part of why people are taking a look at crypto generally, probably Bitcoin in particular. And so I feel a special responsibility to at least talk through and support what that might look like. I am invested in Bitcoin. I hold a few other coins and tokens, but I'm a rather a conservative crypto investor, if that's a thing. Like I remember writing some articles about the prudent crypto investor, and I believe that you can do that. I believe, in my personal opinion, that crypto in general, Bitcoin in particular, should be a small part of an overall portfolio strategy. I believe you should do all the things, and I've done all the things. I own property, I own rental property. I have my 401ks and my 403bs as an educator as well. I have bonds. I have an investment advisor. I work through Schwab. I've done all the traditional things. I have insurance. That is no longer enough given how finances and investing is changing. Also, the fact that we live longer. My grandmother, God bless her, lived to be 103, and she's the only person I know who literally passed away from just old age. Her last words, I will never forget. My mom and some other family members were with her, and she said, "All's well that ends well. Okay." She went to sleep that night. She did not wake up the next day, right? So, but she too, and think of a world where a young African American woman who is just 2 generations from slavery, one from sharecropping, found it within her not only to have land, but to have a will and to pass that on to my mom's generation as well, right? So thinking about all the traditional things I've just grown up that way, it's not enough. When I think about the way that you can really either, as a person of color, as a woman, anyone, quite frankly, who missed out on opportunities where you think of maybe real estate boom when it was just a land grab or industrialization, then you think of the internet and digital asset space and the mobile space. People made huge amounts of money. Yeah, let's look at AI. We're talking about it now. AI's been, and machine learning has been around a long time. Silicon Valley invested in the companies that we see now 10 years ago. The best opportunity to invest is before companies go public.
Mhm.
So where is the space where you actually can make up the distance? And it's being an early adopter and a first mover when economies are shifting. And that's what we're seeing now. And it's also the type of economy where it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, and it matters none of that. Do you have an asset or not? Do you have the money to purchase an asset or not? And that's very powerful when you think about some of the systemic gatekeepers that have had kind of their finger on the or their thumb on the scales a bit, where the kind of the 1% of the 1%, and I have nothing against the 1% of the 1%. I hope to be them someday. But when you think about how do you make up distance, it's not by say a savings account
Mhm.
where we put in six figures. Let's say some awesome, we put in six figures. The bank is keeping the margin between that and how they lend money back to us. That's an old and antiquated system. There's a new way. And so you definitely want to take a look. We're talking 5% or less of an overall portfolio, but it can be a meaningful impact where you'll look back over this time and say, I'm glad I took that move.
Good, like that. There was a term having, which I only
Mhm.
really recently learned what that was, and probably don't quite still understand it because it's an event that recently happened. Can you talk about what that is and how it affects crypto?
Yes, for Bitcoin and for some other coins that have patterned their blockchain on the Bitcoin software, there's an event that was hardwired in or coded in, we should say, uh, when Bitcoin first came into existence. That's in January of 2009. Part of the anti or counter to inflation is the fact that there's this hard cap. In addition to the hard cap, every 4 years, Bitcoin becomes more scarce. Kind of a high level of the way that Bitcoin even comes into existence. You've heard about mining, for example, but it's not this physical process. It's actually a software encoded process where roughly every 10 minutes, a new block of um, verified and validated and secured information, transactional data, is set into a block of transactions. Think of it as a way that if we went to Target and everybody's swiping their card, they're not putting through every transaction at the same time. They're verifying that you can pay for it, but those transactions are all batched in regular intervals and then uploaded to a database. This is a private database, but it's kind of like a rough analogy to what happens to Bitcoin transactional data roughly every 10 minutes. Every 4 years, and Bitcoin miners are responsible for securing that data. They use their computational power in order to guess one specific string of information, and the one miner to do it is rewarded for their activities. That reward is Bitcoin. When the reward, when it first began, was 50 Bitcoin. Ah, Selah, pause and think on that.
Yeah.
Of course, it was like it didn't have a value that or wasn't a first transaction at that point. So you probably would want more pennies than Bitcoin at the time, right? But 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes
Mm.
released into general circulation. Every 4 years, the amount of that reward is reduced by half. So we call that the halving event. And it happens technically every 210,000 blocks. And that occurs roughly every 4 years. We don't always know the precise date and time, but we know roughly the year. And that just happened this time. So it went from 50 to 25, 25 to 12.5, 12.5 to 6.25, and so on. So at the same time that more people, there's more demand for Bitcoin than at any other time with the spot Bitcoin ETFs and 11 banking issuers, they have to have as much Bitcoin as they are selling for the ETFs, which accounts for the most part for the price increase now. But more people, more retailers want it, and it is becoming more and more and more scarce. So that
Mm.
accounts for the price elevation too, which makes it Bitcoin quite different from other coins and tokens. So that's basically at a high level what the halving event is. It's a part of making the scarcity apparent. And that has a corresponding impact on supply and demand, and accordingly, the price of Bitcoin.
Interesting. And it seems to be some controversy around who started Bitcoin. Can you explain that? And do we see this with the other crypto as well?
You don't always see it with other crypto. Satoshi, Satoshi Nakamoto, we believe that it's actually not one person, but a group of people. Could be a man, could be a woman. So let's go with that.
Yes, and
She is
I'm
amazing.
going with a woman, and because the name is Japanese, I am part Japanese.
There you go.
I'm very proud of it.
All right. So you now, this is breaking news. We now have the answer. Yeah, that's really fascinating because, most people would want to be associated with something that literally but uh, did not want to have that as a barrier. From day one, there was no like pre-release of Bitcoin, no coming soon, right? On day one, the first transaction went from one computer to the next in terms of mining Bitcoin, and the rest is history. You can tell the early wallets. There's a kind of like a wallet watch to see if and when Bitcoin move from that wallet to other wallets that were early kind of OGs or original gangsters in the space. But the myth around it, I think, is really, really important because it also is the gift to the world that
Mhm.
that isn't beholden to one person, although we, identify it clearly with Satoshi Nakamoto. And the some of the information that I cover this is at it, but also in my blockchain law course is looking at the writings and the kind of the news posts in the group that was working on and helping Satoshi to test it. There were digital assets that predate Bitcoin, but the problem was, as we talked about earlier, using peer-to-peer technology, but not being able to exhaust or avoid the double comes from Satoshi solved that with the combination that we mentioned. I recommend that everybody read Satoshi's white paper. It's 9 pages. I think it has like 7 or 9 footnotes. It literally changed the world. And it is a technical piece, but I think it is the thing where if you really want to understand what the vision was behind, the summary on the first page says it all about peer-to-peer cash. It's not beholden to a particular government or a particular company, and really empowers people with financial privacy and also autonomy and self-determination. So shout out to that amazing woman, Satoshi Nakamoto.
Love that. All right, as we start to wrap up the show a little bit, Dr. Tanya, how do our audience get in touch with you, the newsletter that you talked about, and just to be able to follow you and learn more?
Yeah, if you go to advantageevans.com, you can have access to a wealth of information, have free master classes on a pretty regular basis at this point. If you want to take a deeper dive, I offer either self-guided courses or I have a community. We meet monthly to talk about what's going on. I recommend that because it's really difficult to learn this and to keep pace when you're not in community.
Mhm.
We have an embarrassment of riches because we're past the information age where there's no shortage of information. The question is, how do you assemble it in a reasonable way so
Mhm.
that you get what you need when you need it? Environment and Carnival Barker, but someone who's also not a naysayer. So at advantageevans.com, you can start there. If you go to an embedded page, advantageevans.com/resources, you also can have access to my Substack. You can sign up. It's completely free. If you're already on Substack, just look for Digital Money Demystified. And then the final thing, the book is available wherever books are sold, obviously at Amazon. I love supporting independent booksellers. So if you can do that and support, in fact, right now, I'm not sure when you will watch or listen, but if you get this sooner than later, the electronic version is available for $1.99. I mean, you've
Nice.
spent worse money, for God's sake. So go and get this book, share it with 1,000 of your closest friends. You don't have to do all the things, but do something today, and you will thank yourself in the future for having the language and the support to really start to figure this out.
Yeah, go get the book, check it out. $1.99 to get education is really inexpensive. And coming from someone who's been teaching and studying it and has done courses on it, definitely a great source for information. So, Dr. Tanya, thank you so much for being on Empower Her Money podcast. I truly enjoyed your interview today.
Thank you so much, and let's do it again. This is constantly your correspondent, your correspondent on the ground.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into Empower Her Money podcast. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe share this podcast, and leave a review wherever you are tuning in.